श्रीशैलेशदयापात्रम् धीभक्त्यादिगुणार्णवम् यतीन्द्रप्रवणम् वन्दे रम्यजामातरम् मुनिम् लक्ष्मीनाथसमारम्भाम् नाथयामुनमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् यो नित्यम् अच्युतपदाम्बुजयुग्मरुक्मव्यामोहतस्तदितराणि तृणाय मेने अस्मद्गुरोर्भगवतोऽस्य दयैकसिन्धोः रामानुजस्य चरणौ शरणम् प्रपद्ये लोकाचार्याय गुरवे कृष्णपादस्य सूनवे संसारभोगिसन्दष्टजीवजीवातवे नमः।
Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So continuing on with our discussion of Sri Vacana Bhusanam by Pillai Lokacharya with a commentary by Manavalama Munigal, we are at Sutra 350. So the section is entitled Mental Turpitude. So it's just looking up turpitude. I know basically what turpitude means, but it's not a common word. So I looked up in the American dictionary here. Depravity, wickedness, acts of moral turpitude. Moral turpitude. So here we're talking about mental turpitude. And other if I look in the thesaurus, it says see depravity. So mental depravity. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so sutra number 350. And just let's have a look at what we were discussing before. There was a very long section last time, which was all about the teacher and disciple, the student and the teacher, relationship between the teacher and the student. And of course, there are different types of teachers. And that was quite a long section, which we covered last time. And much can be said about in all of the Hindu Vaishnava sects. There's a lot that can be said about the teacher and the student, because of course our system of Vaishnavism is a system of descending knowledge, and so therefore we do just like many things that we learn in the material world, also material subjects. If you want to understand a subject, you usually go to an expert, a person who is an expert at that, and learn from that person. So yeah, that's just the normal thing. Okay, so let's continue on. Mental turpitude. The turpitude of mind, or the depravity of mind, consists in contemplation of one's own virtue and of the defects of the Lord, and the tirukutam. Now, kutam, the word kutam, some people may be aware of this word in Sanskrit. Kuta. A kuta is, like you can see over my shoulder here, it's a little hut. It's a kuta, like that. So sometimes when we go to places of pilgrimage, we'll see what is called Ramanuja Kutams. So Ramanuja Kutam, if people are familiar with the word Dharmashala, Dharmashala. A Dharmashala is a place. Dharma means religion or religious principles, or righteous principles. And Shala means a place where people can a kutam, a place where people can shelter. So a mata is also a place where people can shelter. Although a mata, the word mata in Sanskrit also means a particular philosophy. And normally when you go to a kutam, a Ramanuja Kutam, it's like a Dharmashala. It's a place to shelter. So Tiru of course means Shri, means Lakshmi. But Sri Vaishnavas use the word Tiru very often in front of, like for instance, Manjanam. Manjanam means to clean in Sanskrit. Tiru Manjanam means to clean the body of the deity. So we add, just like in Sanskrit, we might add the word Shri before when we say, many people say Lord Narayana, but Sri Vaishnavas tend to say Shriman Narayana, or and we talk about Lord Venkateshwara, Venkateshwara, Tirupati, the Lord of Tirupati. So Tiru is so Tirukutam means like like a dharmashala or a matta or a hut, like that. In this sense, it can also mean a family. A family lives within a house. So the Tirukutam would be the association. In Buddhism, it's for instance, in Buddhism, they say, people offer their obeisances. They say, I surrender to Buddha. Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, right? Sharanam means, of course, like property, surrender. And Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami. I go to Dharma, religious principles, righteous principles. And Sangam Sharanam Gacchami. I surrender to the Sangha. So we also in Vaishnavism, we also, and in Hinduism in general, we can consider the company that we keep, the spiritual company that we keep, other prapanas, other Vaishnavas, other bhaktas, other devotees, other refugees, other Vaishnavas, followers, worshippers of the Lord, to be our association, like that. So the idea of depravity of mind being said here is that thinking of our own virtues, thinking that we have some virtues, and thinking that the Lord has defects, whereas he has no defects, he's spotless, and he has unlimited ananta kalyana gunas, he has unlimited auspicious qualities, and he has no defects, actually. And also the defects, thinking of the defects of others, other Vaishnavas or other prapanas, other bhaktas, other devotees and refugees at the feet of the Lord. That is mental turpitude. That is depravity of mind. So we should guard against this, thinking of our own virtues, number one, and thinking of the opposite of that, thinking of some defect in the Lord and some defect in other Vaishnavas and other bhaktas and prapanas. So the greatest mental misdemeanor consists of contemplating and rejoicing in one's own virtue and achievements. So we should always be self-effacing. This is in Sanskrit called Naityanusandanam. Naityanusandanam basically means humility. We should cultivate humility. How do you cultivate humility? Whenever somebody praises you, whenever you think within your mind, oh, I've done something, I have some great quality, or I've done something, we should always remember the Supreme Lord is working through us, and that we have actually nothing to do with any great thing that occurs in our lives, or any qualities that somehow manifest from us, right? They're all manifest by the Lord through us. So we shouldn't claim those as our own. We should see them as being something which is the Lord is working through us. In the Bhagavad Gita, it says, Buddhi Buddhi Matamasmi. Lord Krishna says, I am the intelligent of the intelligence. I am the intelligence of the intelligent, excuse me. So Krishna is our intelligence. From him, all knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness comes. He also says, I am the ability in man. I am the ability in man. Right? Rasoham apsakunteya, prabhasmi shasi suryayo, pranava sarvavedeshu. I think that's the verse. Anyway, I can't remember the line that says that I'm the ability in man. But he says, I am the ability in man. And women also. But in all of us, he's the ability. We have no ability apart from him. We have no good qualities. We have nothing apart from him. So we should always feel like that. And that is called Naichana Sandanam, or humility, a humble attitude. So we should cultivate this humble attitude. And similarly, we should cultivate the humility in regards to others as well, others around us. And we should not see any defects in the Lord, even if somebody may criticize. Just like sometimes in a joking way, there are some people who have said things. Look at Vishnu. Look at Lord Sriman Narayana, like that. He has servants that fight each other. He has servants that fight each other. Why? Because you have Adishesha, who's a snake, and you have Garuda, who eats snakes. So they must be always fighting, because Garuda naturally eats the snakes, and Adishesha is a snake. But they're both servants of the Lord. So in his household, Lord Sriman Narayana has his servants are always fighting. This is a joke that one Vaisnava, out of some bhava, some some sort of joking way, he was sarcastically saying, look at, he's criticizing Sriman Narayana for having a household where there's fighting going on between the servants. And then he says, he similarly says, and look at he has these two wives. One of them just sits there and does nothing. One of them just sits there and does nothing. And the other one is always going here and there, and you can't stop her, like that. So you've got Bhumi, the goddess of the earth, who obviously sits and just, is still, like that, where you have in Sanskrit or Hindi, they say, Lakshmi Chanchal hai. So Lakshmi is Chanchala. Chanchala hi mana Krishna is in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so Lord Krishna says the mind is flickering. It goes here and there, flips here and there. You think of one thing, you think of another thing instantly, like that. So Lakshmi is like that. She's there, and good fortune is there, but all of a sudden gone, like that. Or somebody has money, and all of a sudden they lose it. All of a sudden they gain it, like that. So good fortune, doesn't often stay permanently around. It comes and goes, good fortune, like that. So Lakshmi is like that. So this person is criticizing Vishnu. He's got one wife that just sits there, Bhumi Devi, and one other wife that's going here and there everywhere, like that. Who knows? She's going here and there. So he criticizes the Lord like that for having servants that fight, and these two wives of opposite characters, and this is of course in ecstasy. This devotee is making these statements, and it's not meant to be taken seriously because he's a Vaishnava. But we shouldn't think of these things seriously as being defects. These are not defects. There's no defect in the Lord's consorts. There's no defect in the Lord's servants, Garuda and Shesha. They don't fight, even though materially you might think that an eagle and a snake, they might fight. But they don't fight because they're 100% servants of the Lord, and they're focused on His service, so they don't fight. And His wives also, they don't fight. They don't have these defects. So similarly, the Lord also doesn't have these defects. He doesn't have defects either. So there might be some leelas where we look and we see, it seems like Lord Krishna or Lord Rama or Lord Narasimha, some one of the avatars of the Lord has some defects. For instance, in the Ramayana, people will criticize why Rama accepted back his wife after she'd been kidnapped by Ravana. Right? Rama's supposed to be upholding Dharma, but Dharma would mean that if the wife is kidnapped, then she's rejected. There would be some rejection of the wife if she's kidnapped. Right? Of course, that's a very chauvinistic or misogynistic type of way of looking at things. But according to the Dharma Shastras, that might be the solution, to reject the wife after she's been kidnapped. Okay, so these days, of course, people don't feel that that's a good way. She shouldn't have been rejected. She was accepted by Rama again, and she proved that she was completely pure, like that, by going through fire. But at the same time, and there's a whole story about that, how the Maya Sita and Agni was actually looking after the real Sita. So the other thing, though, was later on, when she was even pregnant, he told Lakshmana to go and take her out into the forest and take her to the hermitage of Valmiki, like that, and leave her there. So he rejected her. Even after accepting her after that, he rejected her again. So is this a defect in Rama? No, this is not a defect in Rama. And to go deeply into that, we have to look into some stories in the Ramayana, and we have to really study it deeply. But the point being made here in this sutra is that we shouldn't look at certain things that happen in the Leelas of the Lord as being defective. Maybe from our mundane material vision, sometimes we might think that, yeah, maybe this could have happened in a better way, or why did it happen in this way? We don't understand it. But the Lord has a plan for everything. He has a plan for his Leelas, and it's not, these things are not defects. Similarly, people look at Krishna and they say, look at this person. He went out in the middle of the night, called all these ladies, some of them who were unmarried. The unmarried ladies shouldn't be out there dancing with him in the middle of the night. And some of them who were married, actually married to other people. And he called them all, these girls, out in the middle of the night and had a dance, the rasa dance. So this is certainly not, I mean, by modern standards, it's sort of tame because, they were just dancing. But at the same time, in that society at that time, that's considered to be very, that is, I don't know, we're talking about turpitude here. That seems to be moral turpitude, right? That seems to be depravity. But we can't criticize Krishna for doing this. Actually, he married all these girls. And because he's actually God himself, he has a relationship with each and every soul. And this material relationships that they had of having fathers and husbands who were looking after them, that's not a true relationship. The true relationship, or the eternal relationship, is the one that they have between the soul and God. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with this ultimately. But externally, some people criticize. So people who are not Vaishnavas, people who are not Hindus, they look and they say, well, what is this? Your God is depraved. Your God Rama, your God Krishna, they engaged in these depraved things. Somebody look at people also criticize Rama for shooting the arrow from a hiding place and killing Bali, right? And this is not fair. This is not to be done by somebody who is supposed to be the keeper of Dharma. But in any case, we have to, anytime we hear people criticizing the Lord in his particular pastimes for some sort of defect, or criticizing other Vaishnavas, we have to step in and we have to say, no, that's not true. Or if we can't stop that, when we should just not associate with people who are criticizing the Lord or criticizing Vaishnavas. Okay, so anyway, carrying on, 351. One should give up thinking critically about the Lord and the Tirukutam, meaning the Lord and the devotees, the Vaishnavas. Not because fault is there, like his own private virtue, but because it does not exist. One should not think of oneself as the perfectly virtuous, and others who have surrendered as having faults. One should cultivate the conviction that the Lord and his wards, or his devotees, his refugees, his proponents, are essentially free from all faults. Continuing on, in thinking negatively of others, it is one's own negativity that is demonstrated, not that of the other. So as soon as we start thinking negatively of other people, either the Lord or the other Vaishnavas, right, then what it actually shows is, it shows that we have, the word here is given swadosham. The word dosham means a defect. We have demonstrated a defect in ourselves. So when we are criticizing others, that's a defect in ourselves, and we should guard against that. So just like we have to try to think humbly, try to cultivate humility, we should also try to cultivate. We should try to cultivate being non-critical. Now, criticism can be there sometimes. Criticism can be there sometimes, but we only try to criticize in a constructive way, right? What do they say? If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all, right? So sometimes what you say can be true and it can be nice in a sense that it's critical. it's critical. It's constructive criticism. So it's possible to be critical, but it has to be constructive criticism for the person's well-being, like that. But normally, if people are on the path, why should we criticize them? Why should we criticize other Vaishnavas, for instance, right? Just because they may be following some other sect or some other sampradaya, they may have some slightly different doctrines. But if they're engaged in the service of Sriman Narayana, that's the goal. The goal is engaging in the service of Sriman Narayana. That is what the Sri Vaishnavas see as moksha, as liberation, the eternal service of the Lord. So if people are actually doing that, or even if people are not Vaishnavas, but they're engaged in the service of the Lord in some way, in some meaningful way, then why should we criticize those people? Maybe they don't exactly agree with our beliefs or doctrines or practices, but still, why should we criticize them? That's a fault in us if we always try to criticize others. So in the next sutra here, 352, in thinking negatively of others, it's only our own negativity that is demonstrated, not that of the other. If it be asked, how is personal negativity demonstrated? And the answer, it is from personal defect and from relationships. One tends to externalize one's cherished standards and ideals, and thus to project one's own faults onto others. Okay, so this is classic, what psychologists call projection. You project, if you have a fault, you project it onto other people, or you try to point out the faults in others. So there are people who think like this. Okay, what it's called in English is we call those people think that our whole life or our whole existence is what we call a zero-sum game. A zero-sum game means there can only be one winner, and there cannot, and everybody else has to be a loser. So some people think like that. If I have to work, or I have to live in such a way as I come out, I personally come out on top, and everybody else has to be therefore pushed down. So I have to look for the defects in others in order to boost my own ratings, in order to boost my own qualities, like that. If I want to appear to be good and great, I have to make everybody else appear to be not so good and not so great, or even bad and not good at all. So I have to look for the bad. This is one way. Another person has a different. What we should have is instead of having a zero-sum game. Zero-sum game means there can only be one winner. Why cannot there be a win-win situation where others are also good and we are also good? Why can't we see people look at people's good qualities and emphasize those good qualities and neglect the bad qualities? And sometimes the example of the moon is given like this. If we look at the moon is a great source of wonder, and in poetry and in literature, and people who are lovers, they look at the moon and they think the moon is so lovely, and there's so much has been written about how beautiful the moon is, like that. But if somebody wants to actually look at the moon, there are many craters, there are dark patches. It's not a perfect thing. It's not a perfect white, ball in the sky. So it has some different gray parts and different things like that. So you can look at the moon and you can look at the little spots on the moon and you can criticize. Similarly, if you have a white piece of paper or a white cloth, if there's some dirt or some ink on that paper or that cloth, then a spot here or there, right? If we get a spot on our clothes, somehow we get a spot on our clothes, immediately we wash the clothes, right, to get the spot off, like that. And people will look at your clothes. Oh, your clothes are dirty. You must have spilled something on your clothes. They'll look at that spot and they'll criticize. Oh, there's the dirt, like that. Instead of seeing that the rest of the clothes are clean, or instead of seeing the rest of the paper or the rest of the cloth is white, but they'll look for that spot, that defect. Whereas If you have a black piece of cloth or a black sheet of paper and you have black ink, you can't see. You can't see a spot of ink or if your clothes are completely dirty, filthy like that, and another little drop of something you spill on it doesn't make any difference. So this is like we have people who are very low class and they have all bad qualities and things like that. When they do something wrong, we expect it. We expect them to do something wrong. And therefore we don't criticize so much like that. But when they have the person who is a sannyasi or a person who's supposed to be some great guru or something like that, when he does something wrong, even the smallest thing that person does immediately becomes highlighted by people like that. But we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't highlight the faults of others. And even if that person is a great person, especially if that person is a great spiritual person, but also even if that person is just an ordinary person, why should we go through that? This is it's not a good way to act, not a Vaishnava way to act. So one tends to externalize one's cherished standards and ideals, right? There are people who are stoic, who are very tough on themselves. They do a lot of tapasya and they're very austere and everything. And they expect everybody else to be like that. So people have their own standards. Sometimes sannyasis, they'll preach to people, as if the other person is a sannyasi, but that other person may be a child. That other person may be a grihasta, may be a woman. The sannyasi should not preach to them in the same way that he should preach to other people who have taken to the renounced order of life. So sometimes we find this. We've seen in some other spiritual movements that sometimes there's a tendency for those persons who belong to the celibate sections to criticize the other persons who are in household life, like that. It's like a saffron type of criticism. The people in saffron, they're criticizing the other people who don't wear saffron, like that, because they belong to a different part of society, like that. Similarly, you have in Varnashram society, you have people who are the Brahmin caste. They're maybe looking down on people in other castes, and in ashrams, people who are celibates looking at the grihastas, at the householders in a wrong way. But we have to understand. Beyond all those things, if we look in Bhagavad Gita, everybody is Brahmani Gavihastini Sunicheva Swabhakecha Pandita Samadarshanaha. A person of true knowledge sees with equal glance that everybody is equal spiritually. And similarly, this Tirukutam, the association of Vaishnavas, they're all great, and they're all to be praised, and we should not look at any defects that they have, because they're serving the Lord. So in doing this, one continues the futile battle to bolster one's own ego and self-delusion. Everybody wants to establish group ties and feel part of a herd with defined characteristics and structure. So you find that sometimes people join certain religious groups because socially it's acceptable. For instance, if you go to Saudi Arabia, if you're not a Muslim, you might feel a little bit out of place. Right? Similarly, in the association of Vaishnavas, if you're not a Vaishnava, you might also feel out of place, like that. So people tend to adopt the standards and adopt the practices of the people around them. So if you want to be a drunkard, you go and associate with people who are drunkards in a place where they sell liquor, and you become a drunkard. If you want to be, if you want to learn and you want to become, a scientist or a physicist or something, you go and associate with those persons in a university who are also trying to do that, who are also cultivating that. And so the same thing with spiritual life. We try to associate with people who are also have the similar aims to us, and also want to serve Srimad Narayana. So a common mechanism to deal with our faults and inadequacies which disqualify us from belonging to a group is to point them out in others, and thus reassure ourselves and those with whom we are trying to bond that we are free of them. Okay, so in order to show that we don't have any problems, we don't have any mistakes, we don't have any flaws in our character, we point to the flaws in other people's character. And this, even in the Bible, it said that you should not, you look and you see the defects of others, but you don't see you have a defect yourself. You don't see your own defects. Sometimes people will criticize and they'll say, and the other person will say, well, hey, why are you criticizing me? Look in the mirror. You know, you have no right to criticize me. Look in the mirror. You're similarly have so many defects like that. So the best thing is we should look inward, and we should be self-critical and cultivate humility. And we should try to, we should be self-critical for ourselves, but for others, we should try to be lenient. If we tend to see any defects or things like that, we should sort of gloss over them, and we should look for the good qualities and try to bring them out, the good qualities. So continuing on, if personal defects are not present, then there would be the ascertainment of virtue in the Lord and his own meaning the other Vaishnavas who are serving him. Like, personal defects are not present, yes. Seeing that the judgmental process is generally one of externalization, we can only externalize that which is within. Well, that goes without saying that whatever is within, the process of bringing it out is externalization. Duryodhana was asked to find a good man in the world. He searched and saw that everyone had faults and no one was good. Yudhisthira was asked to find an evil person. He too searched and found that all were good and none were evil. So it's a way of, in English we say, some people look at the glass half full or the glass half empty. So you may bring half a glass of milk to somebody. Milk is a good thing, and people like milk generally. So you give somebody, or it could, not even milk, it can be anything, any nice drink. You can give somebody a glass and it's got half the liquid in it, like that, if it's offer somebody a drink. So one person will look at that glass and will say, oh, thank you. He'll be very happy. He'll see it's half full, and he'll appreciate that you gave him half a glass of this, milk or wonderful nectar. And another person will look and will say, no, look, you only gave me half the glass. Why didn't you fill it all the way to the top? Right? So there's people who see the glass half full and people who see the glass half empty. It's the same glass. It's the same thing. So here the example is given of Duryodhana. Duryodhana had some evil mentality. This is what we're talking about here. Mental turpitude or depravity. So he has this evil mentality, right? That he is thinking everybody's evil, everybody's bad, everybody's bad. Why does he think everybody's bad? Because he's bad. He thinks everybody's bad, right? There's a saying in Sanskrit, Atmavan manyate jagat. Atmavan means Atmavan, what I think, what I feel, right? Atmavan, manyate, right, is thought, jagat, by everybody. What I think is everybody thinks. This is sometimes, you'll see this example, it'll be very hot and somebody will say, oh, turn on the fan, like that. Actually, you're the only person who's feeling hot. So you say, sometimes people say in a group, they'll say, are you feeling hot? Okay, so when somebody says to you, are you feeling hot, or are you feeling thirsty, or are you feeling hungry? It doesn't mean he's asking you if you're hungry, thirsty, or hot. What it means is he's trying to say to you, I feel hungry, thirsty, or hot. But instead of just saying, I'm hungry, thirsty, or hot, he says, are you thirsty? Are you hungry? This is not being straightforward. And we do it all the time. So we say, do you feel hungry? What you mean to say is, I'm hungry, like that. So this is called Atmavan Manyate Jagat in Sanskrit. What I think everybody thinks the same as me. No, everybody doesn't think the same as you. We have to understand that, right? We're all individuals. We all think differently like that. So Duryodhana, the way he thinks, because he's evil, he thinks everybody's evil. He can't believe that there's a good person in the world. Whereas Yudhisthira, Dharmaraj, the son of Yama, he is the embodiment of Dharma, of religiosity, of righteousness, right? He can't find an evil person because he doesn't see with that type of vision. Yudhisthira is the half full, the glass half full person. Duryodhana is the glass half empty person. So, continuing on, in the absence of this ascertainment of virtue, the perception of defect is itself a sign of defect. In the absence of ascertaining virtue, the perception of defect is itself a sign of defect. The inability to see the good in others and focusing on their flaws indicates the presence of a negative self-image, which contradicts the spirit of self-realization. Now, what we've talked about the spirit of self-realization before. What is self-realization? Self-realization means that we understand that we are the Supreme Lord's servant or slave, and that we're completely dependent upon him for everything, right? So normally a slave, that wouldn't be considered to be a very good self-image, right? If you think you're a slave, but actually a slave of the Supreme Lord, that's a really good position. That's a very good position, like that. Just like if you were the butler or the maid of a millionaire, you get to enjoy Sri Vaikuntham, right? When you're serving the Supreme Lord, ultimately you're enjoying the place of the Lord. You're enjoying you're enjoying serving the Lord. So it's our actual self-image is important, that we understand that we are a servant. What do they say? Jiva Swarupoy Nitya Krishna Dasa, what do you say? Right? That the Jiva, the Atman, is the eternal servant of God. We're the eternal servant of Sriman Narayana, of Krishna. So that's actually a really good position. That's a really great position, like that. And actually everybody else is also a servant of God. We should see them like that. So we should not see their flaws. So this whole section is talking about negative perceptions that we have. Because why do we have that negative perception of others? And the others being the Lord and also the other Vaishnavas or other people who are serving the Lord, even if they're not Vaishnavas, or just others in general, other living beings, other sentients. Why do we have these negative and defective types of perception? It's because we have our defect. And our defect is that we're covered by Maya and we don't understand our true position. If we understood our true position as a servant of the Lord and everybody else's true position as a servant of the Lord, and as the Lord as our only protector and as our own only master, then it wouldn't be a problem. Then we would not have this defect of criticizing others if we truly understand our own selves. So we're going to talk a little bit more about being critical. Hopefully, let's see how many. That's also a very short section, so we'll continue on. So section 48, being critical. Sutra 357. There is really no opportunity for this thinking critically. There is really no opportunity for this thinking critically. Sutra 358. For there is only time sufficient enough to examine one's own defects and the virtues of the Lord and other devotees. Okay, so we should think like this. Life is short. that life is so short that one only has enough time to examine one's own mind and motivations, and to admire the beauty and compassion of the Lord, and to reflect on the good fortune of others who have had the opportunity to seek refuge in the Lord, and whose company we now enjoy. There is simply not enough time to spend on contemplating the flaws and defects of others. Right. So this is actually a waste of time. Criticizing others and looking at their defects is actually a big waste of time. And I see it's actually a problem that some Vaishnavas and people in general waste their time criticizing others. Now, once again, I said, if you have a position as a teacher or something like that, or if you can give some constructive criticism to other people in a nice way, where they can take it, right? Some people can't take even constructive criticism, so it's very difficult to talk to them. But if there's some way that you can constructively criticize a person, while being humble about it yourself, then that's acceptable. But at the same time, normal, and especially if a person can't take any criticism at all, there's no point. It's just a waste of time to criticize them. Just a waste of time, right? Better to look for their good qualities and try to cultivate that, right? Just like we might find if there's a fire which has gone out, there might be some embers, there might be some hot coals which are still there, and we can fan those things so we can encourage the good qualities in people, right? And in this way, they become better. Rather than always putting people down, oh, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you did the other wrong. Look at what the person did right. There's a saying in teaching. There's a saying in teaching, if you want to teach people things, it's called giving people a shit sandwich. So you give them the criticism, and it's in between two layers of praise. So when you see somebody has some defect, and you want to give some constructive criticism, not that you just want to criticize outright. That normally when you're talking to somebody or you're discussing with somebody, if you just attack their character, which has nothing to do with the discussion that you have some philosophical or doctrinal discussion with somebody, and you start to criticize them for their character and everything like that, that is called ad hominem, an ad hominem attack, and that is not considered to be a bona fide way to try to preach to somebody, right? So this idea of teaching by giving some praise in the beginning and the end, and couching and putting a little bit of the critical, the criticism, the constructive criticism in between, this is a very good way to teach people. So it's called a shit sandwich. So you give them, first of all, you say, well, this is, okay, I've looked at your work or whatever you're presenting to me, and this is very good. What you've done here is very, very good. And you emphasize that in the beginning. Then you say, but it could have been better if you had put the proper diacritics in your work, or if you had broken the Sunday rules, or you had done this, if you had made the translation like this, or whatever the person's doing, or if you'd done the ritual a little bit like that. So we have some classes we're teaching people Sanskrit chanting or ritualism and things like that. So we'll say to somebody, oh, if you had pronounced this word, what you did was very good, except this word and that word you could have pronounced a little bit better this way, or you could have made your vowels a little longer. And you tell people like that. And then at the end you say, but overall, it was good. Overall, it was good. It was very good. Congratulations, very good. Continue on. Keep learning. To try to encourage people to continue. Whereas the wrong sort of teaching to people will simply emphasize the mistake and say, okay, what you gave was good, but what you gave, but this and this and this and this were wrong, and therefore, you know, you failed, you know, in that, and you don't really know how to do this ritual, or chant this mantra, or translate, or whatever it is. So yeah, so like that. So there's the idea is, we should think there's not sufficient time in this life. This life is so short to go on. If you wanted to criticize, this material world is full of faults. It's full of faults. It's full of faulty things. So we just don't have time enough to criticize all the things which are wrong here, right? Better we look at what's right, and we try to cultivate that. We try to fan the flames and make the fire, increase people's enthusiasm for spiritual life, increase people's wanting to do the right things, and wanting to think the right things, and understand in the right way, and have realizations. Try to increase that. Try to encourage people instead of discouraging them. So life is so short that one only has enough time to examine one's own mind and motivations, and this is very important. Self-reflection is very important, and to admire the beauty and compassion of the Lord, right, which we do by seeing the deity, performing his worship, and reading the scriptures about his leelas, and to reflect upon the good fortune of others who have had the opportunity of seeking refuge in the Lord, the other great devotees of the Lord and prapanas and refugees, and whose company we now enjoy. There is simply not enough time to be cultivating flaws and defects in others. So continuing on, Sutra 359, one should rather identify one's own faults with those who are entrapped in samsara. So this is the again, Naichana Sandhanam, or humility. A humble situation is that person always thinks, even the prapana, even after he's performed property, and he's done so many, he's engaged in the Lord's service, even in this world like that, he should always think that he is still unable to attain the goal, which is the Lord himself, and that he is trapped here in samsara. He should always think like that. You know, I up until this is what we think when we get up in the morning. Up until this time, I've completely wasted my life in this material world, and I'm bound to be here and to continue here like that. So today I will try and do better, and I will try and again engage myself wholeheartedly in the service of the Lord, which is the goal. So if we think that we've made it, we've attained the goal like that, then that is wrong. We should be thinking that we are still bound to be trapped in this material world. Far from we shouldn't think to the extent that we become morose, or if we become disheartened. You know, we have to think of it only a little bit. We can't think of it constantly. We can't constantly be thinking, oh, you know, I'm going to be stuck in this material. No, we have to expect. We have to have mahavishwas, or great faith. We have to expect that the Lord will save us. At the same time, we have to cultivate karpanya, or hopelessness and helplessness, right? So we're drowning this is again the example of the drowning man. We're drowning. Somebody is going to come and save us. So but we can't. We think that we're drowning, but we hope against hope. We have great faith that the person is going to come and save us from drowning, the Supreme Lord. So far, critically examining, judging, and rejecting our fellow beings for their perceived faults, we should rather develop a feeling of acceptance and empathy with them, as they are suffering as much as we are. All beings share the same basic hopes and aspirations, and suffer from the same losses and disappointments, and all are mired in the same samsara, or material world. Samsara means the wheel of birth and death, going around and going from one birth, one life to another life, being reborn. So continuing on, Sutra 360. This identification arises from awareness of kinship with other samsara beings. We should be mindful that all sentient beings, including us, are suffering, deluded, confused, and unenlightened, and should thus have compassion on them, since we are all sparks of the same divine light, and thus intimately interconnected with each other and Sriman Narayana. Exactly. So only when you see the Supreme Lord and you see the others as everybody is coming from the Supreme Lord, like sparks coming from a great fire, right? Only when we see that can we understand the kinship of all living beings, of all sentient beings, right? We are all sons and daughters of God. And therefore we're all sisters and brothers. And we have to think like that. And once we think like that, then we can have compassion on others, right? Because those others, they also have similar problems that we have in this material world. Continuing on, 361. The concept does not even arise from saying, we think not a moment. And this is a quotation from Period Tirumoli, 261. The Lord is staying at Katal Malai. Malai means a hill. So there's a place called Katal Malai, which being so cool is conducive to an interesting sojourn. So there's some hill, nice hill where it's nice and cool. If you go up in the mountains in India, it's cool. He took the form of a damsel and entered into the midst of the pernicious demons, offering nectar to the gods only. So this is talking about the Mohini avatar, that when the Lord appeared after the churning of the ocean of milk, the milk turned into nectar, the nectar of immortality, which the Devatas and the Asuras, the Suras and Asuras wanted to both take the nectar of immortality, but Mohini gave the nectar only to the Devatas, or the gods, the Suras, the devotees of the Lord, and those who were against the Lord, who were Asuras, non-devotees, right? Or as here it said, pernicious demons, that she guarded the nectar against them, didn't give them. We will not think even for a moment of those who do not contemplate such a Lord. So what's being said here is, the Lord is staying in this hill, probably referring to some deity of the Lord, right? Beautiful, and he took the form. This Lord who we see before us in the deity form. Here, the devotee who's saying this is saying, we remember that he took this form of Mohini, and he kept the nectar from the demons and gave it to the gods only. We will not think even for a moment of those who do not contemplate such a Lord. So, in other words, the defects of others should not even arise in the mind of the Prapana, which is totally occupied with contemplating the divine. So, when we think of the Mohini avatar, then normally we don't even think of the Asuras, but we simply think of the Mohini avatar as giving the nectar to the Vaishnavas, to the Suras, or the Devatas, the gods, those who are Suras. Continuing on, the purpose of reflecting on defects is their removal. The purpose of reflecting on defects is their removal. So that's why in the morning we do reflect on our defects when we get up, but we're not morose, and we're not disheartened that we think about them all day, but we think of them in the morning a little bit when we get up, because without thinking of the bad defects in ourselves, then it's difficult to move forward to a better place. So the idea of Naichanu or humility is to think of one's defects and to think in such a way that I am so lowly, I am so bad, I am so unfit for the service of the Lord. Let me become more fit. Let me become an actual proper servant of His to be able to serve Him properly. The only valid reason to reflect on defects, one's own or those of others, is to rectify them. This is what I was saying about constructive criticism. And therefore, it follows that one should only ever think of one's own faults and never those of others. Right? It's very difficult to correct other people. Very difficult to correct other people. What do we say? You can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink. That's an English saying. Right? So sometimes you can tell people, you did this wrong, or it will be better if you did it another way. Even if you tell them in a nice way that, oh, you did such a good job, but you could just change this a little bit like that. Many people, they can't hear any type of criticism, and they refuse to change. There are different types of people. There are people who can hear they made a mistake, or they can see with their eyes that somebody else makes a mistake, and therefore they don't make that mistake again. Or they don't make that mistake to even start with. That's a very intelligent person who sees that something is a mistake and doesn't even commit it. Sees another person commit that mistake. Then there's a second person who's less intelligent than that person. He sees that he sees that others have made the mistake. He himself makes the mistake, though. He doesn't learn from others' mistakes. He himself has to undergo that mistake, and then he rectifies himself when he says, "Oh, I did it, and it was a mistake. Yeah, so now I'll never do that again." Once burnt, twice shy is what we say in English. That if you burn yourself one time, we can tell the child, "Don't put your hand in the fire." The child doesn't believe it. An intelligent child, he listens to the parents when they say, "Don't put your hand in the fire, it's going to burn you." He listens and he doesn't. A less intelligent child will say, "Okay, my father said don't touch the fire, but I'm going to touch it anyway." He touches it one time and it's burnt. Then he won't touch it again. As a person who's actually very stupid, third class, intelligent, that person not only touches the fire once, doesn't take the good advice, touches the fire once, is burned. Again and again and again, he touches the fire, thinking that there'll be a different result. We also say in English sometimes, madness or insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and thinking that you're going to get a different result. If you made a mistake, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and do something different. If that doesn't work, do something else that works. That's the point. So, what type of person are you? Are you the person that can reflect on yourself? Are you the person who can learn from other people's mistakes and not make those mistakes yourself? Or are you the second-class person who has to actually make the mistake yourself, and then once you make the mistake one time, you're not going to do it again? Or are you the third-class person who makes the mistake again and again and again and again and cannot be rectified? Cannot learn from his mistakes at all, right? I would submit to you that we are all third class. None of us are first class or second class. We are all third class because we are in samsara. We have been committing the same mistakes life after life, and we still haven't learned. We have been chasing after material things for eons, uncounted times. We have been going around in samsara, and we still haven't learned. So therefore, we are all in that position of third class, right? At least I speak for myself. Okay, maybe some other people, they're more enlightened than me, but let me just say that that as far as I'm concerned, I must look at myself. If I judge myself by those three standards of intelligence, I have to judge myself as last, because I've been going around in samsara, life after life, many millions of lives. So hopefully, I have the hope that the Supreme Lord, or the faith, Mahavishwas, that he will save me. When he will do that, I don't know. That's up to him. But at least I have the hope now that he will save me, even though I'm drowning in this. I'm drowning, but still I have faith that that person is going to save me from drowning. So the only valid reason to reflect on defects, we have to remember this, either of ourselves or of others, is in order to rectify them. So first of all, it's easy to rectify ourselves. It's harder to rectify other people. It's not actually easy to rectify ourselves, but it's even harder to rectify other people because they may accept it or they may not accept it. And therefore one has to, and therefore it follows that one should only ever think of one's faults, right? And never those of others. If one does contemplate the faults of others, it should be with a view to bringing it to their attention in a nice way. Give them that praise first, in a teaching way, in a constructive sort of way, and helping them to overcome them. Not simply to disparage them with the view of boosting one's own self-esteem. Like, yeah, I know more scripture than you. I know more about rituals than you. I know more about Sanskrit than you. I know more than this about you. But there's so many people that know more than me. But right now we're talking about you, and I know more about it than you, and therefore I'm going to put you down. Because why? I'm putting you down because that's the only way I can put myself up. I can make myself boost my own ego. I don't want to. So that's a very bad mentality. That's what we call this moral turpitude that we talked about in the previous section. That's a depravity of mind, and we should not think like that. And so I think this is a very important, these two sections are very important. These are talking about negative things, criticism and moral turpitude. But now we're getting to another section, which talks about forbearance and tolerance, which we will see perhaps next time. So does anyone have any comment or any question about those two sections, about moral depravity or mental depravity, let's say mental turpitude, and criticism? And of course, at the end of criticism, it became a little bit more positive because it talks about the only type of criticism which is good is self-criticism or constructive criticism. So does anybody have any questions or comments about that?
I totally agree with that, Swami. Obviously, it's a very difficult thing to develop, but trying very much to do so. You know, I guess at every point that you think you're finding some type of fault with someone else, you have to try and see that fault in your own self. Probably because you have that fault in your own self, then that's why you're able to identify it in others. So yeah, it's a really difficult thing. I think even Jesus said, I don't know for sure, but I've heard because I went to Catholic school, and if I may quote Jesus in this forum,
you can quote Jesus, but if you didn't hear it directly from Jesus, though. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But he said that look at the plank in your own eye,
right? That's what I was.
The splinter in someone else's.
Yeah, I was trying to allude to that, but I since I didn't go to Catholic school, I have less knowledge of these things than you. I'm more defective because I don't even know the proper quote, but you knew it, so thank you very much. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like that. So yeah, we have to cultivate humility, and the best way to cultivate humility is to always see the good qualities in other people and see the bad qualities in ourselves and try to overcome them. And I think we also have to be mindful that if you find yourself in a group of people and the conversation turns to criticism, of Vaishnavas, especially Vaishnavas, but of anybody, criticism, then you're in the wrong group. You need to leave that group probably, or at least change the subject. you know,
Yes.
and catch yourself when, and it's very common. It's very common. I've noticed this with a lot of devotees who are in ISKCON, that you know, you get this. A lot of social media is geared towards criticism, you know, it makes you want to give up Facebook totally, and some of these other social medias, because the criticism there is so heavy of people in so many different ways, you know. And I think also the reason why social media is like this is there's so many trolls and so many internet people who criticize this, that, and the other, is that there's a certain amount of anonymity. There's a certain amount of anonymous nature of a person on the internet with Facebook or whatever, that you say something and you would never have said that. You would never have said that to somebody face to face. You would never have said that to somebody face to face. So that's the thing. Here's you know, it's very simple. If you're thinking like criticizing somebody, here's something that I do. I mean, what do they say to people? They say if you get angry, you should probably just take a deep breath, count to 10 in your mind before you even say something. So first of all, try to control you know, like we can look back at the Nectar of Instruction by Rupa Goswami in the beginning, Vachavegam Manasakroda Vegam, right? Vachavegam Manasakroda Vegam. Try to control your anger. Try to control your words and your actions. Before you do anything, think about it first. Before you say anything, think about it first, what you're going to say. Before you write anything. But what I do, here's what I do. When I'm writing an email, and I'm being critical of somebody else's opinion in some way, or I'm trying to tell somebody something, and set them right according to what I know. You know, they're asking me a question. Happens all the time. People are asking my opinion, and sometimes I say, "Well, look, you may not like. If I know the person, you may not like my opinion. So I don't really. If you really want me to answer that question, because if you do, you may get upset because I'm going to say something very critical." So first of all, you have to judge other people. You have to judge the person that you're talking to or writing to. So you have to know how to write to them. So what I do is, like, if I'm writing an email or something like that, I read it through again. I have the computer actually read it to me, and I listen to it, and I think, oh, did I really mean to say it in that tone? It sounds really. This is the other thing about writing also. We can't understand a lot of nonverbal communication, emotion in person's voice, the intonation. When we see a person, when you say something to somebody in person, it's something completely different, right? Some of the things that you say to another person in an email or on Facebook or on Twitter or something like that, if you had actually said that to that person face to face, he probably would have hit you in the face, probably would have decked you, you know, started a fight with you. So you have to think like that. You have to think, how is this person taking what I'm saying? You know, is this person going to be able to take that? There's a statement also that says that somebody has to be a little bit advanced in their consciousness to be able to be chastised. So sometimes a teacher will try to tell a student something, and the student just won't accept it. And sometimes it's because the student is so neophyte that he can't grasp the concept the teacher is trying to get through to him, or doesn't know why the teacher is teaching him in a certain way. And it becomes difficult and that's why we have different classes and different levels, because, you know, what is a good teaching for one person. This is why the Lord teaches us all. That's why he teaches us karma yoga. He teaches us jnana yoga. He teaches us bhakti yoga, right? Because not everybody's on the same level. Not everybody's on the same consciousness. Many people are mired in so many materialistic defects, you know. we could preach people who still want to attain so many their material desires. Those people we have to preach to in a different way. Oh yes, you want your material desires to be fulfilled, then please, worship the Lord in this way, like that. I have it, for instance, when I talk to Devarishi in Africa, he has lots of people in Africa who come to him. They're not Vaishnavas. And they come to him and they say, I have this problem, I have that problem, I have this person doing voodoo or black magic on me, and I need to get rid of this curse, and I want I want to get a visa, and I want to get money, and I want to get a family, all these things, materialistic things. And he has to try to engage those people in the service of the Supreme Lord. But at the same time, they want to get their materialistic benefit, like that. If you go to a place where people are, just like we do food distribution to people, like the Christians, they do food distribution, they open hospitals, they open schools. So whatever, these are all mundane things that people, that religions offer to people. Why do they offer? They offer it to them so that those people can benefit. So, but without offering those things, if you didn't have a hospital, if you didn't have a school, if you didn't have food distribution, if you didn't have medical healthcare, that people would go somewhere else to get that, because that's their immediate need. So our immediate need, if we understand the true nature of the self, our immediate need is to re-engage in the Lord's service, because that's our constitutional position. But nobody realizes that. Everybody thinks we have some other immediate need. I have an immediate need to eat, to sleep, to defend myself, to enjoy myself, I have all these immediate needs, and I don't look at the needs of others. I don't look at the needs of the Supreme Lord, which is really the only needs that we have to look after. But also the other Vaishnavas, they also have needs. And we have to look to their needs too, because they're also part of the Lord. Vishishta Dvaita Vedanta means that we serve the Lord, but the Lord means everything. He's everything. He's the whole world. So this idea in India, they say Jiva Seva, Shiva Seva, Jana Seva, Janardana Seva. They have these slogans that if you worship, want to worship God, worship people, worship man. So we're not humanists. We're not just thinking to worship humanity as God. Humanity isn't God, okay? But humanity is part of God. Every living being, every sentient being is part of God. Even the plants, even the animals, they're all part of God. They're all a part of God, and therefore we have to do what's best for all of them. We have to act in such a way as we don't interact wrongly with these other living beings here in this world. They're all servants of God, the plants, the animals, the other human beings, like that. So this example I gave of Garuda and Shesha fighting because their natures are like an eagle and a snake. Their natures are completely opposite. We're in this material world, and there's always incompatibilities here on the material level. There are incompatibilities on the material level. There's so many incompatibilities. But on a spiritual level, there's compatibility between all of us, all living beings, and we're all servants of God. So we have to look for the commonalities. We have to look for commonalities here, and we have to try to overcome the things which we have, the differences that we have. And that can only come by looking for and looking and fanning the flames of devotion, fanning the flames of service to God in all living beings. How can I engage other living beings in their natural constitutional position of eternally serving the Supreme Lord Sri Manarayana? How can I do that best? Krishna says everyone follows my path in all respects. In the Gita, he says everybody's serving me. But how can they best serve him? How can they best serve him? By going to Sri Vaikuntha and serving him eternally in that place. That's the best way for everybody, plants, animals, human beings. So how can we assist the Lord in saving those persons. First of all, you have to save yourself. If you're a drowning man, you can't save another drowning person, right? And even if you're not a drowning man, unless you're properly trained, you can't save another person. Even if you're properly trained, if that person won't give up his wild, being hysterical and lashing out while he's drowning, it's very difficult even for a fully trained person to save another person from drowning. So, first of all, we have to think we're all drowning. We are all drowning ourselves. How can we therefore save others? So we have to have that humility. If we see that we're able to help others in any way, we should try to do that. If we're detracting from others' journey in spiritual life, then we should not do that. And that comes by abstaining from criticizing others. And that's the whole point. That was the whole point today.